Some time ago, a woman came here for an intervention, and when she arrived, she looked like a husk of a human being. She was just dead inside. Not quite dead, because she still had one emotion left. She was angry all the time. So you can imagine how fun that was for her and for her husband. So their marriage was less than rich. So she learned to feel loved and to be loving, and went home and just started doing, and every woman out there, if you want to learn how to start loving your husband, don't make it complicated. There are two things that guys respond to pretty much immediately: touching and listening. So there are 1,000 ways to love, but these two are the simplest, fortunately, also the most important. And for men, usually the easiest to receive. So she started doing that. And one day she was, after a couple weeks, she was holding him in bed, just holding him, which she said, as far as she could recall, had never happened before, ever. And he was holding her back. And during the intervening 2 weeks, he'd been touching her as he walked by and sending her love notes. And so she's holding him, and his head is sort of snuggled in her neck, and he pulls his head back and he looks at her. And he looked at her for a good while and then put his head back in her neck. And then she said, he pulled his head back again and looked at me and laughed. And she said, it was all so strange, A, that they were, holding each other, and B, that they weren't fighting, and C, that she wasn't dead. And so she didn't want to spoil the, enchantment of this moment. So she didn't bug him about what did he mean by looking at her. And then the second time laughing, she was wise enough not to spoil the moment. So she wrote, she said, translate for me. Translate me from man speak into what we human beings, which women think they are, translate this into something I get. So here he is being snuggled, which he loves, but he leans back his face close to hers and looks right into her eyes. So the translation is, because this is new, is, I'm really liking this, but who are you? I used to live with this nest of pit vipers, but you actually seem kind of nice. So I'm just, was kind of wondering if we needed an introduction. And if you are indeed the former nest of pit vipers, where have you been? And is this real? It's kind of wonderment on his part. And he's also partly wondering, so when do you grow fangs again and sink them into my neck? So it's wonderment, he's enjoying himself, but he's also a little skeptical. And he's wondering, how do I respond to this? Because, and that's one reason that he laughed, is you may notice that when people are in really uncomfortable social situations, they will sometimes laugh, because other people then feel socially obligated to laugh in response, which lightens the mood of the room. Laughing sets people at ease much more than, say, throwing up. So he's laughing uncomfortably, which communicates, I am so confused here that all I can think of to do is laugh, because I have no words for all that I'm going through. It's a laugh of partly confusion, partly discomfort, partly even just a little bit of relief. She found this enormously comforting, to be able to understand her husband. And in fact, at one point I said, let me know anytime that you'd like, and we'll get on Skype together and I'll introduce you to your husband. We don't understand the meaning of these things. And in the subsequent weeks after that, she's been discovering that all of those things are true, and that he's now getting to the point where he actually believes that she cares about him, and doesn't keep doing these little sideward glances waiting for the, the fangs to grow out of her mouth. Very fun to watch people learn to feel loved, learn to love each other, and learn to enjoy being together. Very fun. I got a call the other day from a woman who said, "My mother is a witch." And since I know a number of people who are witches and warlocks, that didn't surprise me. She said, "My mother's a bona fide, no kidding diagnosis made by psychiatrist, narcissistic personality disorder. She's selfish, thinks of nobody but herself, cruel, dismissive, unkind, thoughtless." I said, "Yeah, I pretty much got it with the narcissistic personality disorder." She said, but I'm just so angry because today I called and all I wanted was a little emotional support, and she tore me down instead. I said, that would be like you calling me and saying, "I have this pig. I paid a lot of money for the pig. I've fed the pig for years, and now I want something in return. I'm trying to teach the pig to sing. I've fed it, I've cleaned up after it, I've been nice to it, I've given it a warm place to sleep in my bed, and it still refuses to sing. So thoughtless. I ask nicely, but I get nothing in return." Well, pigs don't sing. It's in fact a very old expression. Never try to teach a pig to sing. It frustrates you and annoys the pig. Narcissists don't love. They don't, like, ever. They are incapable of loving. They're incapable of understanding. Actually, that's not quite true. They're capable of understanding whether you're going to give them what they want. But they're not capable of understanding you. So if a parent demonstrates, whether they're a full-blown narcissist or not, if a parent demonstrates that they're unable to love you, shut up and move on and find people who are capable of loving you. You can try to wring blood out of a turnip all you want to and say, "Well, but she's my mother, but she's supposed to." Still trying to teach a pig to sing. Much more productive to get love from people who have it. Whether they're related to you by blood or not is really kind of irrelevant. I've known a woman for years, and almost unique in her ability to turn sunrise into misery. Miserable, argumentative, attacking, complaining, victim-y. She's a walking nightmare for the people around her and for herself. So there's no mocking her here. Her own life is far worse than the lives of the people around her. And one day she came to visit, and she was acting very sheepish, like embarrassed to share a secret. And I'm thinking, how could there be any secrets left? I've heard every terrible, horrible thing that she could think of to say. And finally she squeaked out in this childlike little voice that she was gay. Now she's, 55 years old. And clearly from her tone, I was supposed to be happy for her and celebrate her moment of coming out, because this was the first time she'd told anybody. Now, she might be gay. I don't care whether she's gay or not. That's her business. But she's been consistently afraid and angry for so many decades that from time to time she has claimed to be everything. Bipolar, borderline, depressed, schizophrenic, ADD, possessed by devils. It goes on and on and on and on. The list of diagnoses is pages long that she's claimed. Anything to explain her pain and to give her an excuse for her pain, so that there's nothing that she can do about it. If she can come up with a diagnosis that is difficult to treat, or a diagnosis even that's treatable with a pill, that's acceptable, because then she takes the pill and that fails, and then, the treatment was a failure, but at no point does she take any responsibility. And I said, after all these years of using everything on earth to explain your misery, how would you know if you were gay? You couldn't be like somebody covered from head to toe in mud, head to toe, and saying, I have finally figured out my major life's problem. My favorite color is blue. Well, how would you know? You're covered from head to toe with mud. Mud, you're living in a mud hole. There is no blue on the horizon anywhere. How would you know? So being gay is just almost guaranteed to be yet another, call it whatever you want, label, diagnosis, excuse, something to explain her pain. On occasions, she feels the love that she's given. She can eloquently expound on her joy. I have, in fact, read from time to time here on this video chat more than one letter written by her. A recent letter, I'm going to quote from after she came here for just a day, and she said, what I'm feeling is so profound. I feel like my pain has been healed all the way back to birth. And I told her, well, hallelujah. So now don't forget it. She continued, I hardly even remember exactly anything that you said to me. All I remember is that you mostly just held me and smiled at me and treated me like a beloved child for hour after hour after hour, which of course is what she needed. She said, I just soaked it up and soaked up and soaked up the love like a newborn baby, floating in a sea of welcoming love. I feel I was pretty much in an altered state of consciousness, letting love gently and gradually seep through every age of my childhood and every dissociated cranny of my psyche. Possibly so. She said, I don't know how you had the patience to just be there with me, soaking me with love for so long. Well, if you actually love somebody, it's not all that hard to do. She said, it was like I turned my soul inside out and you painstakingly loved every bit of it. Like 55 years of pain. I really needed it, and I'm so grateful for these days to integrate and let my consciousness slowly adjust. I feel like a completely different person. Just peace, 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 where all there was before was raw chronic pain. I'm having to learn how to function in this new state. It feels like the anesthesia of my former life is wearing off, and I'm fumbling around trying to get my normal functionality back, or like being on a new planet and having to adjust to doing all the same things, but under a different kind of gravity. I'm still kind of off balance, a little weak and vulnerable, but I'm getting there. So that was fairly recently that she stated that she was completely transformed. Now, back to her recent visit of days ago. I asked her, how do you know that you're gay? She said, well, I've been straight for 55 years and I'm miserable. So follow this reasoning. So if being straight for 55 years caused your misery, then if you had drunk orange juice for 55 years, then that would mean orange juice was the cause of your problem. Or if you'd ridden in cars for 50 years, would you now buy a horse in a barn? There's a very big difference, as every scientist knows, between two things being associated and one causing the other. Is it possible, I suggested, that you're miserable not because you've had a misidentified sexual preference for 55 years, but because as a child you were treated like a worthless dog and emotionally beaten every day, which is the case? Or that you've reacted by being a victim, an angry victim, argumentative, attacking, and pretty much hating every human being you've ever known. That you've killed emotionally every person you've ever known. She said, well, no, I have lots of friends that are women, supporting her assertion that she's gay. She said, that's how I know I'm gay. I said, funny, because I've known you for years. I've never heard of a woman that you've associated with for more than a very short period of time, before you've emotionally killed them. I said, so name me these really close, emotionally close women friends. She had forgotten the names of her really, really close emotional friends. What's the point? We love diagnoses. Because once we apply a diagnosis to ourselves, then that removes the responsibility. Now it's the fault of the thing. The diagnosis, the mental health disorder, the sexual preference, the sexual misidentification, whatever. It has now become a fad that I must admit I did not see coming. It's become a fad in schools that once well, I'll give you another example of a fad. The Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, in the United States, found that there were outbreaks of pregnancy. So one girl at a school would get pregnant and get tons of attention, which is, of course, if you don't have enough unconditional love, attention beats the trash out of nothing. And so then 12, 13, 15, 20 more girls within a very short period of time would also get pregnant, almost like it was a communicable disease, because these girls had seen the attention that the girl got for being pregnant, so they'd get pregnant too. Well, now they're seeing outbreaks of being transgender. Again, not likely to be a communicable disease. A kid shows up at school and says, I'm in the wrong body, and I have the courage to come out and tell everybody that I'm in the wrong body, or a girl or a guy. And in these days of political correctness, everybody goes, wow, how courageous of you. And the other girls and guys who are watching all this attention are going, maybe that would work for me. And so there are now outbreaks of that happening all over the country, where young girls, we're talking about, in some cases, kids as young as 9 saying, I was born to the wrong body, and so now I'm going to become a man or woman, depending on what they started out with. We're dying for a reason for our pain. I'm not criticizing people who have chosen to change their sex, or who have chosen to be gay. There's no criticism at all. What I am saying is we're beginning to use these labels to excuse our pain, to explain it. ADD. As soon as parents, I've watched parents learn that their child has a diagnosis of ADD, and I can tell you that almost without exception, the parents who hear about the diagnosis are delighted to hear about the diagnosis. Why? Because now they can give the child a pill. I was in the presence one day of a father who had mercilessly treated his son with unkindness for 30 years and turned the boy into a whimpering, miserable wreck. And one day he heard that the boy was a porn addict, and he was thrilled that the child was a porn addict. Why? Because if his son was just unhappy, then the father would feel some responsibility for that. But if the boy was born with a genetic predisposition to be a porn addict and was addicted to anything that the father was out of control of, then the father would have no more responsibility. We do it with depression, with ADD, with bipolar. It goes on and on and on, to the point that when people come here, I pretty much assume they don't have the diagnoses that they present with. Because simple pain can have the same symptoms as almost every one of these diagnoses. So there are some people who actually have physiologic illnesses. There are people who actually have mental illness that they were born with. But I would suggest that before we give them that label for life and start loading them up with pharmacologic cures, that we consider that every kid wants to be loved. And very, very few have been. So why not try what works better than everything else combined before we start sticking them in little niches and giving them pills? I got this from a woman who is dating. She said, I had a lovely date on Wednesday with Brad. Nice dinner. He bought me flowers. Seems kind and smart. Good humor. A little sarcastic, but I enjoy a little sarcasm. He did not seem to try to impress, and he seemed honest about who he is. We talked easily, and I asked him a few questions about his divorce, how long he'd been divorced, what did he think caused the divorce. Good for you. Look at all that you saw. Seems honest. Looks like he wasn't performing. You asked him about his divorce. The first question that pops to my mind is, what did he say caused the divorce? It's actually on a first or second date not reasonable, without somebody studying real love at all, to expect them to give an honest answer. Because in our society, just as we misdiagnose people's pain, we misdiagnose what we did in a marriage. She sent me a second email in answer to my question. She said, Brad said that his ex-wife is an alcoholic, and that he tried for years and years to make things better. Things would get better for a little while, but then they'd get worse like they'd previously been. His ex-wife's father and her sister and other people in her family are alcoholics. Alcoholism is not an inherited disease. They have never found a gene that's associated with alcoholism. But the pain associated with alcoholism does pass from generation to generation. And an alcoholic will cause pain to his kids. And his kids are going to cast about looking for a solution to their pain. And if they've seen a parent drink all their life, it's pretty tempting to at least try it. So that's the way that alcoholism is passed on, but not inherited. Tough thing to have a wife who's an alcoholic. And as you read the dating book together, you can ask him eventually, because to ask him right now would be unfair. He doesn't know enough to answer this question. But you can eventually ask him what he did after you're about, I think, 30 pages into the dating book, that contributed to the downfall of their marriage, because you can be certain that there were some things he did, that he got angry when she drank rather than love her, which of course he wouldn't have known how to do. He's probably not thought much about what his role in the cause of the divorce is, because alcoholism is so easy to point to. Just like when a partner is unfaithful, has an affair. Oh, so why did you get divorced? Oh, you can almost see the people who were cheated on just almost light up. Oh, well, my partner cheated on me, because as though that were to explain everything, as opposed to, well, my partner cheated on me, but then I was also a completely emotionally cold and abusive human being, and why would my partner have wanted to stay with me? Little wonder that my partner didn't have an affair long before he or she did. Alcoholism and infidelity are just really lovely and cheap and easy excuses, much like ADD and bipolar and all those other things that we talked about earlier. She said, I will take the dating book with me on our next date and read some out of the book. Now, back to her first email. She was just answering my question about, so why did he get divorced? She said, he told me that he had been stood up several times for dates, so he wasn't expecting much from the date. Possibly not a real enthusiastic beginning to a date, but actually not expecting much from a date is a good idea. Much better to just gather information. And he said he was glad that I'd shown up. I think he may have some self-esteem issues related to women. Probably so. If he stayed married for a decade and a half or so to an alcoholic, he might, but we're not going to turn this into a psychological analysis. She said, when dinner was over, he walked me to my car, kissed me goodnight, and it felt wonderful. I'd started to think that this part of me had died somewhere along the way, that I'd lost all romance because I've had so many disappointments with men. But apparently I was wrong. It was nice to be wrong about this. Then we had a second date Saturday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days later. The date was good, but I must admit that when I first saw him, I almost turned around and went back to my car. He's not terribly handsome. And on Saturday, he looked kind of scruffy. His hair was long and straggly looking, and he was dressed in a rather sloppy way. Apparently, Saturday's date was during the daytime. Maybe the first date was in a really, really, really dark restaurant on a moonless night. I really wanted to run, but I told myself that I'd really enjoyed his company on Wednesday, so maybe this wouldn't be so bad. So we ended up having a really good day. I enjoyed his intellect and his humor, but the way he dresses and grooms himself kind of puts me off. So pay attention. You're being a bit superficial. Guys are often ridiculed for being superficial and for judging women based solely on their external appearance. Well, ask any group of women. They're no deeper than guys when it comes to judging people. You're being superficial and judgmental to find fault with his appearance. It's just the cover of the book, honey. It could mean something negative about him. So, for example, if part of his outward appearance is that he hasn't bathed in a month, well, that would be different. But if it's just that he, sort of blow dries his hair and lets it fall around his ears and doesn't really care, it could be that he's just being authentic, which is kind of what you're looking for, yeah? In fact, I recommend strongly to women in the dating book that you don't go all out with the makeup and the clothes and the heels and all that to impress a guy, because you don't want a guy who is attracted to just that. And if you do that up well enough, that's what he'll be attracted to, and he'll miss the rest of you. You went on and said, he's very appreciative of my physical appearance, which is nice, but I don't want to get caught up in trading with him. I don't think I'm trading, but I may be. Well, if you're already judging his physical appearance, then clearly you are trading. You like it that he likes your appearance, but yet you're judging his as being suboptimal. I like the way I feel when I'm with him. I like it that he appreciates my intellect and my ability to converse. But is it possible that I'm trading with him because I like to kiss him? Yes, it's possible. There's almost certainly some trading, but early on, that's kind of unavoidable. All right, so you like kissing him. Great. What matters more is that the only thing you like about him. And see, kissing him on the first date or the second date is not very likely to distract you in a deadly way, but having sex with a guy on the first or second date, you're pretty doomed now, because that's just such an explosion of imitation love that you don't usually recover from that. So now you just find out if he's really interested in learning to love. And now is when you bring up the dating book. You've dated twice. You guys aren't 12 years old anymore. You're not 16 and looking to get laid. You're looking for a real partner. You continue. What do I do if he's kind, smart, and funny, and I don't especially care for the way he looks? It may sound silly, but I'm trying to keep a level head and think about real love principles. If he doesn't keep up appearances much, that can actually make it easier not to trade and for you to see who he really is. So I would suggest the next time you get together, you read for 15, 20 minutes of the dating book and then go out and do whatever it was that you were going to do. Really, you'll learn a lot about this guy by his reaction just to your suggesting that he read a book. And what if it turns out that this guy has a soul as deep as the sea, and you just adore who he is, but he doesn't come packaged, in exactly right. I mean, imagine Christmas time, and whoever it is gives you the perfect gift, the thing that nobody knows you want, but that you've been looking for all your life. You get the perfect gift, but it wasn't wrapped in exactly the right color wrapping that you would have expected. You're going to throw the present away? I doubt it. So get to know him, and you'll be surprised how your opinion about his appearance can change, or that it doesn't matter. Here's somebody who says, I've been doing real love for a year and doing so much better, and I happen to know this person, so yeah, you really are doing better. But sometimes I screw up, I stutter, I get lost, I give away my feeling of peace. I hate that. It's embarrassing, and I don't want to do it anymore. So listen to this part. It's kind of counterintuitive. Stop hating it. Notice you say, I hate it that I give away my peace, that I stutter, that I get lost. Why do you stutter and lose confidence and peace? Because you forget that you're loved. You forget the feeling. What's the solution? Remember the love. Trust it. Remember it. Give it to other people. Possibly get a new infusion of it. But hating your mistakes only gets in the way of all that. You don't fight darkness. Instead, you light a candle. You don't fight fear. You just feel loved. You don't fight hate. You just love in return. Love wins. So hating even things that are negative is not a solution. I know a woman who's been in real love for a few months and so afraid of everything. Afraid of her husband, her kids, flying, bugs, life. She did an intervention and her husband wanted nothing to do with it. When she got home from her intervention, he didn't even ask her how it went. Didn't even care. Just sort of looked up and went back to what he was doing, like, oh, so you're home. So what time do we eat dinner? Nothing. But it made a huge difference to her. It was like watching somebody wake from the dead. She can't believe that she's actually worth something. So one night she asks Ron, her husband, for a massage and says, I'd like you to use massage oil and lots of touching and just being gentle. She was just dying for some attention from him. And he says, oh, I'm tired. Now, he wouldn't have been too tired to go out deer hunting that night if his buddies had come by in a truck, and their rifles. But I'm tired. And he gets into bed and he rolls away from her. And she was feeling alone, and she was lying there in bed kind of sniffling quietly, the kind of sniffling where he couldn't quite tell the difference between, because he didn't want to tell the difference, whether she was crying or had a cold. And she's been doing this all of her life. Miserable scene. Here are two people in the same bed who haven't been communicating with each other for, 30 years. He finally decides, there's no way I can miscommunicate this or misunderstand this as a cold. So he says, so how are you doing? You poor women, you have to understand that we guys don't know how to ask these questions very well. She's over there crying, and he says, how are you doing? Great. Sometimes I just cry. And so she asks more clearly for what she wants. She wants to feel close to him. So they just hold each other. She says, I can't tell you when that last happened, but it would have had to have been at least 30 years ago. It's far back as I can remember. And they both loved it. Turns out that did lead to sex, but she said that wasn't really the crowning moment of the evening. It was the holding. The fact that he paid attention to her and just they held each other. So the next day, he texts her from work and he asks how she's doing, which she says he hasn't done in, like 20-something years. And she says, well, I'm doing better. Okay, it's better than nothing, maybe, but that's a mistake. So here's a guy who hasn't communicated something emotionally to you from work in 20 years, and he asks you how you're doing. I'm doing better. No, that's not even close. When your partner's gone out of their way to help you feel not alone, better's not enough. We need to express gratitude, not the kind of manipulative gratitude that we do so that somebody will do it again. Just, she could easily have just said, I am just so grateful that you paid attention to me last night. I just felt wonderful. I felt really cared for. Although he didn't know that's what he was looking to hear, that's what he wanted to hear. It's unfortunate that guys don't know how to describe what they feel, and they don't know how to describe what they want. So she wasn't content with that little mistake. She did what nearly all of us do. We think, okay, since you asked, let me tell you the rest. But we forget that whoever we're talking to isn't asking for a critical analysis of them. So she responds, here he's been the most tender he's been in 20 years. He asks about her and she says, I think we need to take more time when we're having sex. See, why not just shoot him? Because he will only take that as a criticism of all the times that he hasn't taken more time. See, that's the only thing he'll hear. We need to take more time. What's he going to hear? You don't take enough time. That's it. And he's going to hear that about all the times that he hasn't taken enough time or hasn't been thoughtful or caring or given her time and attention. So what's the solution? Again, amazingly and consistently, gratitude. So thank you so much for last night. It meant a lot to me that you would change your plans so much from sleeping to paying attention to me. I feel so much closer to you. So once I translated that from, man talk into, intelligible speech, which is really quite a translation, she hung up and marched right off to work and found him to correct her mistake and said exactly what I'd said. And she's beginning to get somewhere with him. He walks in the door, he looks at her. He comes into the kitchen or wherever she is and hugs her and looks her in the eye. She said, these are things I don't ever recall happening before. So sometimes we need a little help with translation of what we're doing and translation of what our partner's doing. And boy, is it worth getting the translation. Here's somebody who says, my wife's mother has been living with us until her house is built. My wife's mother's house is built on our property. When I read that, I started laughing. So you weren't drunk and you agreed to build a house for your wife's mother on your property. That was very brave of you. Both to have her house built on your property and to have her living in your house, or completely insane, one of the two. The writer continues, the house is now complete, and oddly, I want her mother to move out into her own house on our property. But there's always one excuse after another why it's not ready. So Laura, my wife, doesn't want to inconvenience her mother. In other words, she's just as afraid of her now as she was when she was 4. She doesn't want to inconvenience her mother because the final details are dragging on. Things like the trim isn't around one window, or there's a broken tile in the bathroom, that kind of final details. I want my house back, and I'm not sure how to handle this. This isn't really hard to understand. Notice you said that your wife doesn't want to inconvenience her mother. Okay, I understand that, but two things strike me. The inconvenience is very small. She has a house to live in that's quite livable. We're talking about itty-bitty little things like a cracked tile or whatever that exist in my house that I'm living in now. I don't move out. And they will only be minor inconveniences to her as the final details are finished. So it's pretty little stuff. And second, you are Laura's partner. You are her number one priority. Her mother comes second. In fact, her mother comes a distant second or 22nd. And this is where the idea of partnership comes in and really can help clarify everything if both partners are willing to listen and learn. Partners never make decisions separately that will affect their partner. So, for example, I can eat whatever breakfast cereal I want or answer emails in whatever order I want because it doesn't really affect Donna. But when I spend money, when I take a trip to teach somebody, or anything that affects her time, resources, inconvenience, anything, I talk to her first. Shoot, I tell her when I simply go out in the backyard because it would affect her ability to find me if she wanted to. Why do I do that? Because I have to? Because she's in there going, you better tell me first. Because she's my partner. Isn't that like kind of duh? I mean, do you spend money? If you have a business partner, do you spend money without consulting your business partner? No. Do you go on a long, expensive trip and negotiate a contract with an investor or another company without talking to your business partner? No. Well, then you don't do things that affect your emotional partner without talking to him or her. I simply think of my partner first, always. Everybody else comes second. Kids, everything. That's a partnership. That's kind of the definition of a partnership. If you have something less than that, you don't have a partnership. You just sort of are two people that live in the same house, maybe. Now, that doesn't always mean that I'm with her and physically putting her first. For example, at this moment during this video chat, I'm not spending my time with her. But we talked about it and we agreed on it. We agreed on my being apart from her. Same with you two. You are first to Laura before her mother. Having your mother-in-law there is not a little thing. It's distracting. It's inconvenient. You just plain lose your privacy and peaceful surroundings to some extent, for one thing. So tell your partner that as your partner, you simply need her help. No irritation, just a clear statement that you need. That's all you have to say. You don't need to justify it. You need her mother to move out because you need your privacy, or what? Don't do an explanation. And move into her own place. The place isn't exactly ready. Too bad. She can live with it as easily as you can live with her being in your house. And they can finish the details while she's there. Specify a date, preferably within days, or in my case, I would say she has 18 minutes. A date when your mother-in-law will be gone. And get back to the business of being partners with your partner. Somebody wrote me, and I don't remember who now, but somebody wrote and said, most people seem to be confused about God. That's an understatement. Almost everybody sees God as a bigger version of the leaders of parents, teachers, ministers that they've known all of their lives. So, considering that we human beings are fatally flawed, no wonder they're confused. The writer continues, I've been confused about God my whole life, but it's becoming clearer. God was just another authority figure who was unloving, mean, a punishing source of control, and abusive, just like my parents. We learn about God through our parents, don't we? Like as in, oh yeah, like duh. If our parents were unloving, rarely is it possible for us to believe in a loving God. Just impossible. We generalize from our parents to God. You continue. If parents are our gods when we're little, it stands to reason that that what we learn in childhood would become our vision of God for the rest of our lives. So if our parents are unloving, we would see God as unloving. If our parents love us unconditionally, then we would see God as unconditionally loving. You're doing a great job of explaining this for me, yes. You say, I realize that the reason that I've been so confused is because I didn't have a loving father or mother to show me what God's love looked like. That's true for most of us. God is really kind of just like a big daddy, isn't he? Exactly like. And if God is a loving daddy, he wouldn't be mean or vindictive or a crazy micromanaging dictator like I've always thought that he was. Why would he want me to suffer? He wouldn't. And he wouldn't be controlling. Right. Which is exactly why sometimes he actually allows me to suffer. Doesn't cause me to suffer, allows me, because that's what I need in order to learn. Just as a weightlifter gets stronger by lifting weights which are uncomfortable, we very often are motivated to learn only by being uncomfortable. Pain motivates us. But he doesn't want me to suffer, nor does he cause me to suffer. Such misconceptions and such a difference. It's not just a play of words. The writer says, he would love me unconditionally and teach me. All I have to do is be open and listen. God actually wants me to be happy. Yep. When I think of him this way, I don't have an aversion to God like I've always had. I used to mock God, criticize people who believed in God. I was an angry atheist. I don't think I can claim that anymore. I definitely feel God now. God is the feeling of love that's always there. I don't think I could have said that any better. Beautiful. This is from a woman who has a 3-year-old son named Jack. Her husband, William, is a proud and adamant, it's accidental that these two emails are close together and about a similar subject, but her husband, William, is a proud and adamant atheist, which is an odd position to take, to be proud of not believing in something, but there are a number of people like that. While she is Christian, she says, I get the feeling that now that Jack, the 3-year-old, understands a lot more and can express himself a lot more, William, my husband, wants to make sure that Jack doesn't get influenced by my crazy religious beliefs. Notice your use of the word crazy. You didn't make that word up. William, because I know him, uses that word with you to demean your beliefs. He calls them crazy. If you were to call his atheism crazy, I promise you he would not be pleased with it. So I've always been interested everywhere I've gone, because when people are interested, I'm happy to talk about God, and if they're not, I don't. But atheists love to mock Christians. And yet, if you mock an atheist, they almost uniformly become angry. It's an intolerable thing to do for your own husband to mock you for your beliefs about anything. I would suggest that you not allow that to happen anymore, especially in the presence of Jack. You never ridicule somebody else's beliefs. If you allow that, you teach Jack that ridiculing is okay, and Jack learns that you are worthy of ridicule. His own mother. Pretty bad things for a 3-year-old to learn from somebody, regardless of what their beliefs are, whether they're about religion or politics or whatever they are. You continue. I get that we need to agree on everything concerning Jack. Not everything, but what you're referring to is a subject that I've talked about many times. Partnership. So here we've talked about partnership twice in this chat. Until you agree on something, you do nothing, whether it's spending money or whatever. But this applies to things that affect both of you. You don't both have to agree on, say, your favorite color, or what you like to eat, or what you wear. You don't insist that your husband, William, wear a dress to work, for example. You get to be yourself while you are in a partnership. That's what a partnership is a blending of two people who are not the same. You continue. Like him. So we need to agree on things like whether or not our son comes to church with me or whether I teach him Bible stories. But at the same time, God is part of who I am now. And it's just bound to get shared with him. Like I sing songs to him a lot during the daytime. Some of them are about God. So when Jack asks me what song it is, I tell him it's a church song about God or Jesus or whatever. And if he asks me questions about them, I answer them. Is that different? Is it okay for me to answer the questions? Well, yes. You're not trying to push him to believe a thing, but you get to tell him what you believe, just like William gets to tell him that he doesn't believe in God. So William can't expect you not to be you. William can do this, your husband. He can tell you, for example, not to take Jack to church with you on a Sunday or whenever, because that would affect time that he would have with Jack. He can tell you not to teach the Bible to Jack at your instigation. But William cannot do this, and stay a partner. He can't forbid you from answering questions that Jack asks you. That's controlling. That's not partnership. He can't forbid you from singing, say, Christmas songs, for example. He can't forbid you from referring to God in the course of a conversation in a way that you would do in the process of just being you. He can't make you hyper-vigilant or afraid about referring to God. He can't do that. That's not partnership. It's control. These sound like subtle differences. They're really not. Listen to them again and you'll hear that there's a big difference between allowing and controlling. Or you could both agree to teach him whatever you want. You could just both agree that you can teach Jack anything you want to about your faith, and that William can teach him anything that he wants to about his faith. It's a little ironic that atheists claim not to have a faith when actually they really do. They have a faith in a universe that is absent God. It's still faith, just not faith in God. We've addressed quite a number of subjects, and sometimes it sounds like the subjects are really different, but the real answers to most of these questions come down to whether you have enough love in your life. If you do, the answers become increasingly apparent without anybody having to tell you the details to the answers. So the general answer is still, as we talk about every week, we find the love we need, we trust it, we remember it, we share it with others. In the process, we will become gloriously happy, and we will have a tendency, kind of as a bonus, to attract people to us, after which we get to share our happiness with them, which is a repetition of the fourth step. So we'll see you in a week.